Good morning. Continuing with the first Sunday of the month, looking at Beatitudes, or some Beatitudes. We ran out of the ones from the Sermon on the Mount, and so I've kind of pulled some from here and there. And today the one we'll look at is in the 106th Psalm. If you'd like to open your Bible to Psalm 106, that's where the bulk of the scripture content will come from this morning. I want to note for you, as not typical for me, so I do want to put it out there that most of the scriptures, if they are from a psalm, they will be from the New International Version. As the psalms are poetry, being able to fit the theme and maybe not word for word is typically recommended. The big deal is this. The New International Version doesn't use observe justice, it says act justly, and I wanted to clarify that. The New King James says to keep justice. Psalm 106, let's look at the first three verses here. Praise the Lord, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. Who can proclaim the mighty acts of the Lord, or fully declare his praise? Blessed are those who act justly, who always do what is right. That sounds terrific. But if you'll scan down through the psalm, if you're looking at it there, this psalm is going to go through some of the worst things that Israel had ever done. Some of the most terrible betrayals of faith and breaking of the covenant between themselves and God. And this is the way the psalm starts with, blessed is the one who doesn't do anything that I'm fixing to talk about, who always does what is right. In this psalm, two men specifically are named for stopping God from exposing his wrath to the people, from destroying Israel. And I do mean that, stopping God, because of their coming and doing what is right. And we'll look at those a little bit later. This psalm begins with blessing for the one who does what is correct. And it ends with blessing God for his steadfast love. So here at the beginning and at the end of the psalm, you have the ideas of both blessing and the love of God. And in the middle, you have, and this is how mankind makes a mess of so many things. The betrayals of faith. They start in the immediate subsequent verses. In verses 6 and 7, we have sinned even as our ancestors did. We have done wrong and acted wickedly. When our ancestors were in Egypt, they gave no thought to your miracles. They did not remember your many kindnesses, and they rebelled by the sea, the Red Sea. We didn't even get out of Egypt, is what the author is saying. Not only that, it's while your miracles were happening, the miracles that are being discussed here are the 10 plagues. The 10 plagues took years to undergo. Some will say up to 5 to 7 years for all 10 plagues, and some put it closer to 2 or 3. But it's a period of time where God is offering judgment against the gods of Egypt. And before all of them are concluded, the Israelites, whom God is acting on behalf of, are already forgetting the things that God has done. How quickly we can forget about things. They get to the Red Sea and they see that the sea is up, and instead of relying on the same God who just turned a river to blood, who just sent swarm after plague after herd of, I don't know what you call a group of frogs. What do you call that? I don't know. Gross of frogs. And they just aren't going to get it. They keep forgetting. So in 2 verses later, in verse number 9, he rebuked. This is God rebuked the Red Sea and dried it up and led them through the depths as through a desert. This is a terrific word, and it's a concept that I want us to just hold on to for just 1 minute. Absolutely nothing can keep you from the salvation of God if you'll be there for it. The sea is in the way. The enemy is behind. What are God's people going to do? There is no task, there's no situation, there's no problem so insurmountable that your God can't fix it. He rebukes the sea. And then we get to a verse, or we get to a statement that is so common. And I really want us to not ever forget it, because it's about forgetting. A trick that I had been taught. It's just a way to say things in your head. I want to remember something is a stronger way to teach your mind to remember, because you say the word remember. I'm not going to call any names, but it might do good to say, I will remember not to lock my keys in the car, instead of saying, I'm not going to forget my keys. I will remember what the Lord has done for me. But soon they forgot, verse 13, what he had done, and did not wait for his plan to unfold. In the desert they gave into their craving. In the wilderness they sought to put God to the test. So he gave them what they asked for, but sent a wanting disease among them. This idea of forgetting is so common with God's people, and it's easy for us to do as well. What have you done for me lately? What is it that we're doing now? What's coming up that I can look forward to, instead of spending time dwelling on thanking God for the things that he has already done for us? So in the idea or the thought of those who observe justice, where would you put these characters, these people? They don't weigh out all the blessings that God's already done. They're only looking for what's ahead. They're not observing justice. They're not observing the things that have been done and weighing that appropriately. Well, what if we put that in a context now? If God will save your soul from eternal damnation, what do we need to do to balance that act of justice? Well, how can we do that act justice? What can we give that is equal to what God has given for our soul? Absolutely nothing. We could give the whole world and it couldn't add up to that. So what should be our attitude? What should have been their attitude in moving forward, understanding the things that God had done for them already? In the camp, they grew envious of Moses and Aaron, who was consecrated to the Lord, is verse 16. I wrestled with this one. Why might this one be added or included in this psalm? Because of the relationship. It says it's because they were consecrated to the Lord. Other translations are going to say sanctified, set apart for the purpose and use of the Lord. They are envious. The ESV actually says jealous. They're jealous of the relationship that Moses and Aaron had with God. Okay, well, work on your relationship with God. You can't just go take it from somebody else. You can't make your relationship better with God by tearing down someone else's relationship with God. It doesn't work that way. And yet this is one of the approaches that they took. They were jealous of the relationship, and they had forgotten the relationship they had already received with God. Again, the idea of not looking at things in a balanced way. Verses 19 to 22. At Horeb they made a calf and worshipped an idol cast from metal. They exchanged their glorious God for an image of a bull which eats grass. They forgot the God who saved them, who had done great things in Egypt, miracles in the land of Ham, and awesome deeds by the Red Sea. They made a calf. They had already forgotten the salvation that God afforded them. They're going back to gods that they saw created in Egypt. Verses 24 and 25, they despised the pleasant land. They did not believe in the promise. They grumbled in their tents. They did not obey God. The time frame for this one, the spies had gone into the land. They had come back. All of them had the same report. That place is great. 10 of them had a slightly different perspective. It's also got giants in it, and we are like grasshoppers in their sight. They're going to take us out. We ain't got a chance. No prayer. The other 2 spies said, God's already given it to us. Why are we slowing down? Let's go. They didn't believe in his promise. You mean God brought you out of Egypt? He took you through the sea. He showed you the things that he showed you at Mount Sinai. They were so great, you were figuratively scared to death, according to the scriptures. You see these awesome things that he has done for you. He's brought you to the land of milk and honey, and that's what your spies came back and told you about it. And now you think he's not going to let you in? Somebody's mama needs to smack them on the head and say, you're being dumb. You're not getting it. God has done all of these things for you. In verse 28, they yoked themselves to Baal of Peor and ate sacrifices offered to lifeless gods. Here again, they have left the worship of God. They also take prostitutes to their beds, and we'll talk more about this scripture later. In verses 32 and 33, we read that God's not happy with the fact that they caused Moses to sin. And this is the sermon that I gave Sunday night before last about Moses getting so flustered with them that he doesn't speak to the rock as he is supposed to, but he strikes the rock and tells the people that he has brought forth the water. By the waters of Meribah, they angered the Lord, and trouble came to Moses because of them. For they rebelled against the Spirit of God, and rash words came from Moses' lips. Now, I do want to point out, everyone individually is responsible for their own sin. And even Moses had to pay for the transgression that he made. He was not allowed to enter into the promised land. And yet, God also puts some of this on those that would transgress. Those who would push others to their breaking point as they had pushed Moses to his. In verses 34 to 39, we read of some of the worst atrocities that could ever be. An excerpt from that section of Scripture: they sacrificed their sons and daughters to false gods. They shed innocent blood, the blood of their sons and daughters, whom they sacrificed to idols of Canaan, to the idols of Canaan. And the land was desecrated by their blood. A typical way that this was done is that you would light a fire, and they have this God-shaped cast bronze image with a hole in the middle. And after you get this image glowing hot, and there's typically orgies and drinking and fun and games around the idol worship here, you would take your baby and toss them into this burning bronze thing. And it said here that the land was desecrated because of their sin. Time after time they walk away from God. Many times he delivered them, but they were bent on rebellion. They wasted away in their sin. Yet he took note of their distress when he heard their cry. For their sake he remembered his covenant, and out of his great love he relented. Why would God continue to take back a people that is so broken, so worthless, that is so, as the scripture says, bent on doing wrong? Not just making mistakes, intentionally going against God and calling on other gods. Why would God continue to take them back? Out of his great love, he relented. Steadfast love is used, and we'll talk about that in a moment. I kept all my babies. I don't think I've ever called on anything else as God. There's some of these things that I think we might identify and say, I've never been that bad. Well, if God's willing to forgive even them, how much more will he be willing to forgive you? Two men are called on as slaking God's wrath. Moses is said to have stood in the breach. Verse 23, so he said he would destroy them, that is, God would destroy the Israelites, had not Moses, his chosen one, stood in the breach before him to keep his wrath from destroying them. The idea of standing in the breach, let's talk about that for a moment. When an invading army would come against a city, you try to tear down a wall, and for thousands of years there's been ways to do that. You could dig a hole underneath the wall and kindle a great fire, and it would weaken the foundation and the wall may fall in. You could raise up a trebuchet or a catapult or some other means of throwing a big old rock and knock a hole in the wall. Eventually you get cannons and stuff such as that. Or you could march around it for 7 days and blow some trumpets. That seemed to take down a great, terrible wall. Standing in the breach is the idea that when a hole is created in the wall, that one man would come out to parley with the adversary. Well, that one man is right in the line of fire. After all, they just hit that spot. They know how to hit that one. And he stands in the hole in the wall and says, I will parley with you. What are the terms of this engagement? It is not a place that is safe. It is a place that is prone to violence, and the Geneva Convention changes a lot of things, but parley is not always accepted. You raise the white flag, and at points in history, and even including this time, that doesn't have to be honored. And yet Moses stands before God and says, don't kill the entire nation. If you got to punish somebody, blot me out of your book. But don't kill the whole nation. Notice even the wording here in verse 23 calls Moses his chosen one. Now we can go to Hebrews and look at so many ways where the lawgiver for the Old Testament matches up with the lawgiver of the New Testament. What are we talking about? Comparing Moses to Jesus. And in the same way that Jesus lays down his life so that we might have salvation and protection from the wrath of God, Moses here stands in the breach. He stands between God and the people and says, what else can be done? The action of being willing to pay for the sins of another is foreshadowing for Jesus, and it's impressive to God. Well, how do you know it's impressive to God? Because he turned away righteous judgment for mercy. The second one takes a little bit of setting up. It's what Phinehas has done. And the people of Israel are sinning. And Numbers chapter 25 verses 6 through 8 reads, Then an Israelite man brought into the camp a Midianite woman right before the eyes of Moses and the whole assembly of Israel while they were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The reason they are weeping is because they have left God and God has sent a plague and thousands of them are being killed. The plague is sweeping through the camp and people are dying left and right. And here Moses and other leaders are mourning that this is going on. And while people are lamenting their sin, this guy walks in with a prostitute and says, we're going to bed. When Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw this, he left the assembly, took a spear in his right hand, and followed the Israelite into the tent. He drove the spear into both of them, right through the Israelite man, and into the woman's stomach. Then the plague against the Israelites was stopped. Wonder what position they were in that he could get them both with one stick. He takes a note out of JL's playbook. What makes this okay? What makes this acceptable and useful in the context of the 106th Psalm? The same things that anger God, that move God to action, are the same things that moved Phinehas to action. Phinehas stood up and intervened, and the plague was checked. This was credited to him as righteousness for the endless generations to come. In two different ways, both of these men are mentioned. One is mercy toward God's people because of self-sacrifice. So that's mercy. The other is mercy toward God's people because of righteous judgment. So there's judgment. And you have this balancing act always with our God. It's mentioned at the beginning and at the end of this psalm. It's put in slightly different terms. One of them is justice. Whoever does justice and acts righteously. And it says at the end, it talks about God's justice as well. But it also talks about his steadfast love. And if you'll look in certain translations, I believe it's the New King James, doesn't render this word as love at all. Steadfast love or otherwise. The New King James renders this word as mercy. And so you have this balancing act with God at all times, and thankfully so, because what we deserve is not what we want. We want mercy. But also what will come to the entire world is judgment. And so here you have both men, Moses and Phinehas, who represent not only the mercy of God, but the justice of God in doing what is right. As the second verse said, blessed are those who, our third verse, blessed are those who act justly, who always do what is right. Why would God allow himself to be moved? That's a good question, right? What makes Moses so special? What makes Phinehas so special? Priests? Well, Moses isn't. He's a prophet, not a priest. Phinehas is going to be a priest. He's of the lineage. What makes them special is their desire to do what is right and to act for the name of God. He saved them for his name's sake, to make his mighty power known. God's agenda is not solely to punish sin, but it's to bring people to peace with himself. That's why he made the covenant with Abraham in the first place. So steadfast love, or amazing love, or great love, or mercy is mentioned 3 times in this psalm. It's not just the justice of God, but the justice of God must be balanced and always will. And thankfully it is. The justice of God is balanced by his mercy because of his great and steadfast love. The second verse of this psalm says something really cool that I think works well with the way that this psalm plays out. Who can proclaim the mighty acts of the Lord and fully declare his praise? It's kind of a disclaimer at the beginning. Who can get it all right? And then remember the next verse, it says, blessed is the one who always does what's right. But how can we know the fullness of God? How can we know how far his mercy, his love will go? And when does he need to say, okay, I'm cutting it off right here. We need to have justice. The psalm speaks to God putting himself in an impossible position. He continues to save the people of Israel, his people, for his name's sake. I want to call you back to the covenant that he made with Abraham. If you want to go here and look, I'm going to paraphrase it for the sake of time. It's Genesis chapter 15, and he has Abraham cut these animals open and in half, and then late in the evening, God passes or causes to pass between those cut pieces a lamp, a representation of him. The way covenants work, especially at this day and age with Abraham doing this, is the one who passes through those cut open animals is saying, I make a promise and let me be like this, what's on either side, if I don't keep my promise. In other words, let me be put to death if I don't uphold what I have said. What has God said? That he will bring a blessing to all people, going back to our annual theme, through the descendants of Abraham. He's going to give them a promised land, and he's going to make their name great. Or he may die. May God himself die. You know, it's kind of funny. That's exactly what happens, isn't it? Why would God enter into a covenant with people he calls stiff-necked? Exodus 33:5, the Lord had said to Moses, say to the people of Israel, you are a stiff-necked people, if for a single moment I should go up among you, I would consume you. So now take off your garments, take off your ornaments, that I may know what to do with you. Okay. Why would God go into this covenant with them? He knows they're a stiff-necked people, and he knows that if he were to be in their presence, if he were to show himself to them, it would consume them. His holiness would overcome and obliterate them because of their sin. Why would he enter into covenant and put his life, as it were, on the line? Is this what the plan was from the beginning? That we would have God come to earth, and here God sends His Son. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And that a body is prepared for Jesus. And Hebrews chapter 10, verses 5 through 7 read, consequently, when Christ came into the world, He said, sacrifices and offerings you have not desired, but a body you have prepared for me. In burnt offerings and sin offerings you have taken no pleasure. Then I said, behold, I have come to do your will, O God, as it is written of me in the scroll of the book. God says, I put my life on the line to maintain the covenant with Abraham. And at the end of the covenant of Abraham, God puts His life on the line. Jesus is sacrificed for mankind so that all could be blessed through Him, that blessing being salvation. And so God upholds His promise again. A God who cannot literally be with His people did the only thing that could be done so that He could be with His people. Why? Because of His steadfast love, because of His mercy, so that we don't have to get what we deserve. So blessed are, divinely favored, are the ones who can look at the sacrifice that God has given to us and say, I can never repay that, but I can do what I can. The psalm itself, again, one more time, those who always do what is right. That's a tall task. It ain't me. Maybe it could be you. According to the Scripture, I highly doubt it. No accusation made. But what I can say is that I know because of His steadfast love that a people who continue to ruin their relationship with God, I can be better than that. I can be better than continually ruining my relationship with God. Will I?